We are on Daf Lametes Amid Aleph. And we are on the fifth line. The fifth line of the Gemara states, having to do with the type of fish that was discussed in the Mishnah called the chilik. The chilik is a type of fish that the Mishnah had said you're not allowed to eat. And the reason why you're not allowed to eat it is not because it's not a kosher fish, but rather because in its immature state, its scales are not visible. And therefore, even though you could identify it, but when it's sold commercially, it's mixed with another kind of fish which looks very similar to it, and it's a non-kosher species. And as a result, the rabbis decided to ban it completely when you're buying this fish in its immature state. Tanu Rabbanan, ein lo achshav va'asid legadol la'achar zman. So this leads to a whole discussion of what defines. We know that fins and scales are the features of a kosher fish, but as fish develop over the course of a lifetime, sometimes they'll develop scales later on, and sometimes they'll lose their scales. So therefore the Brisa says like this: if a fish currently does not have scales, but it will eventually develop scales as it matures, kagon ha-sultanis ve'ha'afitz hareza mutar. So these are two examples, the sultanis and the afitz fish. Those are kosher species of fish. Yesh lo achsha va'asid laharsha b'shash olam min hayam kagon hakonas va'aponas katas patias va'achas patias va'otnas mutar. But if you have a fish that has scales, but when it's pulled out of the ocean, the scales fall off, that too is a kosher fish, because at one time it had scales. And the Gemara then lists different known fish at that time. It seems to be some kind of Greek names for these fish. Achris Rabbi Avohu b'Keisari. Rabbi Avohu made a public announcement in Caesarea. And he said, Kirvei Dagim, could we ask that when you walk down this hall towards the daf that you don't speak loudly after we've already started shir? Thank you. Okay. Achros Rabbi Avohu b'Keisari. Kirvei dagim ve'ubrin nikachin mikol adam cheskasen ein boin ela miplusa ve'aspamya. So Rabbi Avohu made a public announcement, and he said that if you purchase fish entrails, which was basically the discard of the fish because the poor men, that's all they could afford. If you buy the escargot or the caviar, the eggs of fish, it's all kosher. Now that's ironic, because today when you buy caviar, it's all from sturgeon, which is a non-kosher fish. But apparently, in this region, all fish eggs that were sold, fish roe, were all considered to. What's the difference between escargot and caviar? Anyone know the difference?
Snails.
Oh, snails. That's right. So I didn't mean escargot. I meant caviar or fish roe. Right. Sorry. So if you buy, they're all disgusting and exotic. But anyway, if you buy them in this region, they're all kosher. Why? Because they all come from kosher fish.
Fascinating. That was a poor person's food, and now it's the most expensive thing we can imagine.
No, so it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means kirvei dagim was the poor man's food, but the fish eggs could have been more expensive. We don't know that. And this is consistent with Abaya's announcement. He said that any fish that comes out of the Bav River is permitted. So my taima, what's the question? Well, what's the reason? Maybe the Gemara theorizes, maybe it's because the current of the river is so strong that fish that are non-kosher, since they don't have spines, can't survive in that strong current. Maybe that's the theory. But we find plenty of non-kosher fish that survive in waters that have currents. Ela mishum demelichi maya v'haidak tami kevin delesle kalfi beduchta demelichi maya lo matzikoi. Our second theory, perhaps, is that maybe because it's salt water, and in very heavy saline bodies of water, fish without scales can't survive. The Gemara believes that scales is like a filtration system to protect the fish from saline. And if a non-kosher species doesn't have that, it can't survive. And that's the reason why they said it's kosher. That can't be, because we find plenty of non-kosher fish in bodies of water that are salt water. So Ela mishum delomar betina dag tame. So the Gemara's answer is that it's endemic only to that particular river, to that particular region. The soil, for whatever reason, maybe it's too alkaline, maybe whatever the issue is, does not allow non-kosher fish to live in that kind of environment, so in that habitat. So that's the reason why. But you can't extrapolate to other rivers. You can't extrapolate to other saltwater bodies. Amar Ravina ha'idna de kashavchi be'nahar guza nahar gamda asiri. And Ravina goes even further. He says that was back then. But today, the water channels have changed. And now that these two rivers, the Guza River and the Gamda River, pour into the Bav River, then there are non-kosher fish, and you can't rely on previous generations' pronouncements. You know, it was well known even in the times of the Gemara, that bodies of water change all the time. Sometimes things move further upstream. Look at Niagara Falls. Look how much it's moved in the last century. Bodies of water are constantly shifting. And so here's another example. What the halacha that applied 100 years ago no longer applies because of the shifting currents and the shifting bodies of water. Amar Abaya, hay chamra diyama shari, tura diyama asers. So Abaya says there are two species of fish. One is called the sea donkey, and the other one is called the sea cow, or the sea ox. Yeah, and so the sea donkey is kosher, and the sea ox is not kosher, ironically, because on land it's just the opposite. So v'simanech tameh tohar tohar tameh. And the way to remember it is that which is tohar is tameh, and that which is tameh is tohar. Okay, Amar Ravashi, shafar nuna, shari kodesh nuna asir. Another two species of fish, the pretty nuna and the holy nuna. One is, the first one is permitted, and the second one is prohibited. The simanech kodesh lashem. And the way to remember it is the holy nuna, things that are holy are normally prohibited for human use. And therefore, that's the way to remember it. Ika da amri kevar nuna asr v'simanech kivrei ovdei kol chavim. Others say that it's not called the holy nuna, it's called the grave nuna. And the way to remember that that's the treifa fish is because the graves of idolaters are prohibited. Rabbi Akiva ikla leginzak aisu lekame hahu nuna da'avadami lechipusha. So Rabbi Akiva comes to a town called Ginzak, and they bring before him a fish that looked like a chipusha fish, which is not a kosher species. But he was a little bit curious. He wasn't going to disqualify it right away. So what did he do? Chafya b'dikula chaza be'kalfi v'sharye. He put the living fish in a basket, let it flay around a bit, and while covering the basket, and then pulled the fish out and looked at the walls of the basket. He noticed that there were small scales. And on that basis, he said the fish is kosher. Ravashi ikla l'tamduria aisu l'kami ahununa dahavadami l'tzlufcha nakte lahadayoma chazad habebeit tzimchi v'sharye. Similar story of Ravashi coming to the town of Tamduria. They bring him out some exotic fish. It looked like a tzlufcha, which is a non-kosher species, but he held it out into the sun, and he noticed if you looked really, really carefully, you could see small scales. And on that basis, he permitted it.
It looked like an eel, believe it or not.
Really? Is that what it says in your notes? Yeah. Okay. Rav Ashi, you know, you ever heard of the frankenfish? Have you heard of that? They now cross a salmon with an eel to get these huge, huge salmon. And so it would seem, I don't know, I haven't examined the halacha carefully, but it would seem that this new crossbreed, it has fins and scales, so it should be kosher regardless of the fact that it was crossbred with an eel, but I'm not paskening.
There's a very interesting fish in South Africa called a king clip.
Yeah.
So when we were there, it was on the menu, and I was looking it up, because it's to see if it's kosher or not, and it is. Because it looks like an eel. It's a thin. Was
it a kosher restaurant you went to?
No, it was just like a.
Okay, then we have what to talk about. Okay.
No, but Rabbi, just hear me out. It's a very interesting fish, Rabbi. It's like a long, and I was looking up on my phone. There's a rabbi who wrote about it that it has one scale.
Really?
Yeah.
One scale.
One scale,
Wow.
one fin, or one, and the
There
Torah
you go.
doesn't
Pay half price.
Does it say scales or does it say
And-
scale?
right. Even if it's one, it's enough.
Psh,
And then
okay,
and then
interesting.
we saw it at the kosher market. They had it frozen.
Okay.
Oh,
there
you've
you go.
recovered now.
It's called the king clip.
You should have
Okay,
started where you saw it at the
Ravashi
kosher
ikla
market.
le'ahu asra, aisu lekame nuna da havadami l'shafar nuna. So another story, Ravashi comes to this town called, another town, we don't even know the name of the land. And they bring him out a certain kind of nuna, a nuna fish, that looked like a shafar nuna, again, a non-kosher species. Chafye b'meshichli chivri chazi bekalfi v'sharye. He put it into a white container, covered it up, and allowed the fish to flay around, and then examined it against the white walls of the bowl and discovered that it had scales and it was okay. Rabba bar barchana ikla la'akra da agma, krivuleit sachanta. Rabba now comes to a place called Akra da Agma, and they bring him out a fish that they call tzachanta. Now, tzachanta is normally a kosher fish, so he's about to take a bite out of it, but Shamei lahu gavra da'avakarele bati. But he heard one of the locals say, oh, they're serving bati. And Rabba knew that bati is a non-kosher species. He says, what's going on here? So Amar midakakarele bati shmamina davar tamei isbei lo achal minei. And he said, well, basically, the fact that the guy called it a bati fish implies that there's something non-kosher, so he didn't eat it. L'tzafra iyin bei ashkach bei davar tamei. The next morning, he carefully examined the fish, and he discovered that taka, it was, based on its symptoms, it was a non-kosher species. Kori anavshe lo ye'una l'tzadek kol oven. And he pronounced about himself, no evil will befall the righteous. In other words, thank God Hashem watched over me and let me hear this guy say it's called a bati. Next, v'hakoret shel chiltis. The next thing that the Mishnah had said is that a granulated chiltis is not permitted. A granule or some kind of piece that's cut off from a larger chiltis plant is not permitted. When I was growing up in yeshiva, I think maybe it's Jastrow or somebody else translated chiltis as ginger. But I haven't seen, I don't know, in the more contemporary translations, they don't translate it. They just call it a chiltis. But I remember learning that it was ginger, so I don't know. But anyway, my time, mishum demafsik le b'sakina, our Mishnah had said that you're not allowed to purchase it from an akum and eat it because, and so the Gemara explains why, because when they cut it up, when they chop it up, they use knives that are not kosher. And there may be some residue or some absorption from the knife that absorbs into the chiltis and gives it flavor from something non-kosher. Afal gav do omar mar no sein tam lifgam mutter agav chorfe de chiltisei machalia le shamunisei v'havale keno sein tam lishvach va'aser. And the issue is that even though you'd argue, well, that's an old 24-hour-old residue that's in this knife, what could possibly be the problem? The answer is that chiltis is a davar charif, it's spicy, and as a result, it ameliorates even bad flavor and turns it into good flavor. And that's the problem. You know, people have this shiloh all the time. When you cut a cucumber with a fleishich knife, can I serve it with milchiks? Sure, as long as you know that the knife was clean, it's no problem. But I cut into an onion with a fleishich knife because it's a davar charif. Even if the knife is an eno ben yomo, it hasn't been used in 24 hours. The charifus, the spiciness of the onion, ameliorates the flavor that comes out of the knife when you apply pressure for cutting, and therefore that onion halachically is 100% fleishich. Yeah. The only question is, do you have to wait 6 hours after you eat that onion? So the Pri Megadim says yes, but most poskim say no, you don't have to wait 6 hours. But to mix it with anything dairy, you certainly are not allowed to do it.
Garlic too, or just onions?
Garlic, anything spicy.
So garlic, onions, what else?
Onions, lemons is another example.
Radish?
Radish, according to many, is yes. Radish is also.
You think lemons, oranges, anything citrus?
No, not oranges, but lemons. Yeah. Okay. Avdei de Rabbi Levi have a kamaz bin chiltisa. Kinoch nafshe de Rabbi Levi asu lekame de Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Levi had a servant who was not Jewish, obviously, and he used to sell chiltis, cut up pieces of chiltis, of this ginger, and presumably, since it was under Rabbi Levi's supervision, everyone accepted it. But then Rabbi Levi died, And people wanted to know, could they rely on this servant to still sell chiltis, that it was still kosher? So Amrulei Maulam is bin Mines. Amrlahu Avdu Shel Chaver Re'u Kechaver. They said, once he's been under the tutelage of a chaver, someone who's makpid on halacha, so then you can assume that everything that he produces is still kosher. Rav Huna bar Minyumi Zovan Techilta Me'anshe Devesi de Rav Amrim Chasida Asila Kamid Rav Yosef Lo Hava Biyadeh. So Rav Huna bar Minyumi we used to purchase techeles from the members of the household of Rav Amram the Pious. Even after he had passed away, his wife and his children were still selling techeles. Now, techeles, the issue is that it can be easily forged with a cheaper commodity called kala ilan, which is vegetable indigo. And since it's very hard to tell the difference, people will sometimes try to scam the public by selling vegetable indigo instead of real techeles. So the question was, is it okay for me to continue buying from the mishpacha even though Rav Amram Chasid is no longer alive? Rav Yosef didn't know the answer to the shaila. So Paga bechanan chayta Amrle Yosef Amru minole or monole bidit monole or minole. So he came before Chanan Chayta. So now it seems to me that one way of understanding it at least is that this same person, Rav Huna bar Minyumi, came before Chanan Chayta, and when he told him that Rav Yosef didn't have an answer, he said, oh, poor Yosef, where does he know, where would he know it from? Because he never had that experience. So therefore, we can't blame him for not knowing the answer to the shaila. But, b'didi hava uvda, d'zavini techilta me'anshe devise de Rav Noah achva de Reb Chia bar Abba, v'asoy lekami de Rav Masna, lo hava biyadeh. I once had the same experience. I used to purchase techeles from the household of Rav Noah, the brother of Reb Chia, and I came to ask the shaila of Rav Masna that after he died, is it okay for me to continue buying techeles? And he didn't know the answer, but Asala Kami de Rav Yehuda Mehagrunya, Amar Li, Nafalta Liad, Hachi Amar Shmuel, Eishes Chaver, Hariyu Kechaver. So I came before Rav Yehuda of Hagronia, and he told me, aha, you've fallen into my clutches, meaning that this is said humorously. Whereas up until now, you've been independent, you didn't need me for any psak halacha. Baruch Hashem, now I've got one thing that I can teach you finally. And the thing that I can teach you is that we paskin that the wife of a chaver is always like a chaver, even presumably posthumously. The Tana Rabbanan Eishes Chaver Ariyu Kechaver, Abdul Shel Chaver Ariyu Kechaver, the Brisa says, both the wife of a chaver and the servant of a chaver have the same halachic reliability as the chaver himself.
When we say servant, they mean a goy, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Chaver shemeis ishto ubanav v'vnei velsari v'chezkasan asher yechashdu. And this is true even after the chaver dies, that his wife and his children have an assumption of still being reliable until proven otherwise. V'chein chatzer shemochrin bat cheles harei hi b'chezkasa acheti pasel. And similarly, if there's a certain shop or courtyard where they sell techeles, and it's already been proven that they sell the authentic stuff, you can assume that it continues that way until proven otherwise.
This is similar to a Heskes Kashrus?
A Heskes Kashrus, exactly.
Yeah.
Tanu Rabbanan. But it's even on a commercial basis, there's a Heskes Kashrus, a store.
Right.
Which is interesting because, it doesn't work that way in Kashrus today, But anyway, that's another story. Tana Rabbanan, Eishes am haaretz sheniseis lechaver, v'chein bito shel am haaretz sheniseis lechaver, v'chein avdo shel am shenimkar lechaver, kulan srichen lekabel divrei chaverus. The Brisa now says that if a woman was previously married to an am haaretz, who's not careful to tithe things, and is not as meticulous in halachic observance, and she gets married to a chaver, a real Talmud Chacham, or the daughter of an am haaretz marries a Talmud Chacham, or the servant of an am haaretz who gets sold to a chaver, so you can't automatically assume that now that they're in the household of a chaver, they're going to do everything correctly. They have to be trained, and you have to hear them accept upon themselves all of the policies and laws of a chaver before you can rely on them. Aval eishes chaver sheniseis la'am haaretz v'chein bito shel chaver sheniseis la'am haaretz v'chein avdo shel chaver shenimkar la'am haaretz einon tzrichen lekabel divrei chaveros lechatchila divrei Reb Meir. But Reb Meir is of the opinion that if it's the opposite, that if she was previously married to a chaver and then she marries an am haaretz, or the daughter of a chaver who marries an am haaretz, or the servant of a chaver who gets sold to an am haaretz, There, since they were raised previously, knowing how to do everything halachically correctly, you can assume that even though they're now in this home of an Amoritz, they still retain their cheskas kashrus, and they're going to do everything correctly. That's according to Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says, Omer af hein tzrichen lekabel divrei chaveros lechatchila, that he says, no, once they transition to the Amoritz's house, all bets are off. Even if previously they were behaving correctly, you never know that their environment may be have an adverse effect. V'chein hayer Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer Maisa be'isha echa shenisais lechaver v'haisa kosheres lo tefillin al yad nisais lemoches v'haisa kosheres lo kishrei moches al yado. And to cite an example, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says he knew of a story about a woman when she was married to a pious Jew. She used to help tie up his tefillin. But then she got married later to a moches, who's a tax collector. Those guys were notorious for stealing from the poor, right? Like the sheriff of Nottingham, right? And she used the same skill of tying to tie seals on the posts, on the doors of these people to show that the taxes had already been collected. But you see that just because someone knows a skill in the house of a Fruma Yid doesn't mean that that skill will all automatically be translated for virtuous things once they change their environment. Next subject. Amar Rav Chavis Aser B'Chaisam Echad Champag Mutter B'Chaisam Echad. We have two abbreviations. The first abbreviation, Chaf Beis Yud Taf, represents 4 different kinds of food items. And Rav says that these things are expensive commodities, and as such, you have to suspect that if a Jew sends them to be transported by a Gentile, he may doctor them and try to exchange them for something that's not kosher, that's less expensive. Okay? And so those things, it's not sufficient to send them via an akum with only 1 seal. You need at least 2 seals. But there's another variety of foods that are less expensive. There's less likelihood, therefore, that the goy is going to swap them, and therefore only 1 seal is sufficient. So what is the first 4? Basar yayin, chalav, basar yayin tcheles asurim b'chosam echad. Milk, meat, wine, and tcheles. So the last 3 I certainly understand. Meat, wine, and tcheles are expensive commodities. But where does milk come in here? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. So those, because of their expensiveness, need more than just 1 seal. They need a minimum of 2 seals. But chiltis, murias, pas, and gvina mutarim b'chosam echad. But this ginger, fish brine that's mixed with fish fat, and bread and cheese, those are cheaper commodities. There's less likelihood that the akum will be tempted to swap them. So just put 1 seal and you're fine. So the Gemara now says, now here the Bach and Rashi take the next 4 lines of the Gemara and say they don't belong here. They don't belong here. There's a whole girsa swap here. Something happened in the Gemara and the publisher made a mistake. So I want you to skip the next 4 lines and go to the word virav, and we'll come back to those 4 lines in a moment. Virav, maishna gevina de lo torachu mezayev. So the question now is, according to Rav, you only need 1 seal for cheese because it's not an expensive item, because the goy is not. So he's not going to go to the bother of trying to swap it and counterfeit it. So chalav nami lo torachu mezayev. So then why does milk need 2 seals? It says if cheese doesn't need it, then certainly cheese is more expensive than milk. So Amar of Kahana apik chalav ayel chatichas dag she'ein basimin. You're right. The ches of champag does not stand for chalav. That was a mistake. It stands for a piece of fish, meaning that it's like you have a large tuna and you cut open the tuna or the salmon and you take out a chunk of the fish without its scales, so you don't know what it is. So then it needs to have 2 seals because it's expensive and it's not identifiable, and therefore it needs 2 seals. But the Gemara says, Hainu basar. Why do you need to say that if you've already said meat? Meat and fish conceptually are the same thing. It's an expensive piece of animal flesh, and it doesn't have any simmons. That's why you need 2 seals. So why do you have to say both? The Gemara says, Trei gavne basar. You're right. It's just for thoroughness, but it's really the same thing. You're absolutely right. Ushmuel Amar. So up until now, we've seen the opinion of Rav. Rav says champag needs 2 seals, which means a piece of fish. What did we say? Champag, or sorry, chavis rather. Chavis stands for a piece of fish, meat, yayin, wine, and tcheles. Those all things need 2 seals. Okay? Now Shmuel, however, has a different abbreviation system, and he has only 3 and 3 instead of 4 and 4. He says Beis Yud Taf. Instead of chavis, he has Beis, right? And those are things that are asur b'chaysam echad. Those you need at least 2 seals. And machag, instead of champag, he says machag. He takes out the pay. So mutter b'chaysam echad. There you only need 1 seal. So what are the 3 and the 3? So basar yain tcheles asurim b'chosam echad. So the 3 are meat, wine, and tcheles. Need to have at least 2 seals, and murias chiltis and gvina mutar and b'chosam echad. And this fish brine and ginger and cheese only need 1 seal because they're less expensive. Now l'shmuel chatichas dag she'ein basimin hainu basar. So the Shmuel, why doesn't Shmuel hold of adding a piece of fish to that set that needs 2 seals? Because he says it's subsumed, a piece of fish is no different from a piece of meat. And Trei Gavnei Basar Lo Amrinan. There's no need to talk about 2 different kinds of animal flesh. It's the same thing. Now go back to the second line of the Gemara. Why does Shmuel take out pas out of the list of the things that only need 1 seal? Right. And this is how Rashi learns. Pas l'may nechoshla. I'll tell you why. In other words, because it's so obvious that for bread, you shouldn't need 2 seals. That it wasn't necessary for Shmuel to even include it in a list of items that only need 1 seal, because it's so self-evident that bread only needs 1 seal, and it doesn't need any extra added guardianship, because it's such an available commodity, and there's no reason why a goy would want to doctor it or adulterate it or forge it in any way. He says, what are you worried about? If he's going to try and swap it, well, one will be one loaf might be fresher than the other, and that'll be easily detected. If he's going to try to swap, like in other words, what is he trying to swap it for? Because he wants the fresher loaf, he's going to give you a stale loaf instead? He says, you'll be able to figure that out. That's detectable. What, he's going to try and put a barley loaf, which is less expensive, instead of a wheat loaf? That's also detectable. And iki hadadi, he says, and if you're going to try and swap 1 for 1, where the price differential is almost non-existent, keven deika chaysemecha lo tarachum mazayif. Why would he even do that? It's not worth the risk of getting caught and trying to pass it off as the same loaf. It's not worth the risk.
You won't make a lot of bread out of it.
You won't make a lot of bread out of it. And therefore, the Shmuel says you don't even need to include it in an abbreviated list because it's so obvious that you don't need more than 1 seal. Tanu Rabbana. Now the Brisa says, Ein lochin yamach machag besurya. So there are 6 food items that you're not allowed to purchase from the marketplace in Syria. And says Rashi, this is even true if you're buying it from a Jew with a big yarmulke with a picture of the Rebbe on the wall. And the reason is because even though they themselves are from, they sell items that they buy from non-Jews, and they sell it to everyone on the marketplace. They don't discriminate. They're not going to say just because they see an Orthodox Jew walking in, don't buy this or don't buy. Anyone who wants to come and buy, business is business, right? So that's the attitude in Syria. So what are you not allowed to buy from them? Lo yayin v'lo murias v'lo chala v'lo melech sal kundaris v'lo chiltis v'lo gevina. So the 6 items are wine, this fatty fish brine, milk, sal kundaris, salt, which we'll explain what that is later, ginger, and cheese. So, and all of these have problems of kashrus. Ela min hamumcha. You can only buy it from someone who already has an established reputation of only selling kosher. V'kulanim nisarech etzel balabayis mutter. However, if the guy with the big yarmulke and the picture of the Rebbe invites you for Shabbos, you can eat at his house. It's only that he's suspect of selling to his customers non-kosher food. But in his own home, he's never going to serve treif. So, Misayeh le Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, the Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, shargalo balabayis lebeiso mutter. My time of balabayis lo shavik ketera v'achel isura v'chi mishagerle mimay do'achel mishagerle. And this supports the same ideas as said by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. He says that if a balabas sends you food from his home, even though he may be suspect in the marketplace, you can still trust that the food that he keeps in his own house, he's never going to bring tray from his own house into his own house, so therefore you can rely on the kashrus. Fascinating psychology, if you think about it.
I guess his wife is there.
Oh, that
He's still
right. The Gemara doesn't say that that's the reason, but you're right. In our times, it's probably one of the factors. Umelech sal kondaris. So then the sal kondaris salt. What is that? So my melech sal kondaris. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel melech shekol sal kondari rome ochlin osa. It's a type of salt that is used or consumed by Roman bakers. That seems to be the way that Rashi explains it. Now, what does that mean? It's a salt that's very coarse, like kosher salt, but they mix in with it because they get it from the sea, so they mix in with it in order to make it more robust, I guess the flavor, more flavorful. They mix in with it the grease or the fat of non-kosher fish into the salt. So when it granulates together with the fat of these non-kosher fish, and that's why it has that. That's why it's not kosher. Tanu Rabbanan Melech Sal Kundara Shechora Asur Levana Muteres Divrei Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda Omer Levana Asur Shechora Muteres Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel Mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Omer Zu V'Zu Asura. We have a three-way machlokes, and it sounds like a machlokes in Metzias. The first opinion of Rabbi Meir is that the black salt of this variety is asur, but the white salt is okay. The second opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is just the opposite. The white salt is treif and the black salt is okay. And the third opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel is that both the black and the white melech sal kondaris is asur. So Amar Rabbar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yechon, L'divrei Homer Levana Asura, Kirvei Dagim Levana Mitamim Me'uravin, Bala Divrei Homer Shchara Asura, Kirvei Dagim Shchar Tameim Me'uravin, Bala Divrei Homer Zu V'Zu Asura, Zev V'Zeh Me'uravin Ba. Basically what he's saying is that they're all basing their opinion on what was done in their experience. Right. The first opinion, the rabbi of the first opinion, his experience was when they would make the salt in his place, they would only use treifa blackfish, but when they would make it from a whitefish, the whitefish was kosher. In the other Tana, it was just the opposite. They used the treifa whitefish and the blackfish was a kosher fish. And in the third Tana's locale, they made the salt from both treifa whitefish and blackfish. So anyway, that's the reason why they argue. Amar Rebbe Avohu Mishum Rebbe Chanina ben Gamliel, Zakin Echad Haya B'Shechuna Seinu, Shahaya Machlik Panea B'Shumin Chazir. Rabbi Avoh says that I heard from an elder that the reason why this salt is not kosher has nothing to do with fish entrails that are mixed in with it, but rather when they granulate the salt, they then smear it with pig fat in order to make it look really shiny. And that's the reason why it's asur. You can just imagine, when you want to put granulated salt on top of a bagel, let's say, to make it look really delectable, you can imagine them smearing it with a type of fat. Okay. Hare'elu asurim. So the last line of the Mishnah said, all of these things are prohibited for eating, but are permitted behana'ah. So normally, when a Mishnah makes that final statement, it's coming to exclude something. So that's the question, is l'mu'utei mai. What is that last line coming to exclude? L'chizkiya l'mu'utei biyadua. So remember from yesterday's Gemara, we talked about pickle brine, that you're not allowed to purchase pickles because they sometimes put wine in the brine. So the Mishnah had said that it's asur b'achila, but since you're not sure whether they added wine to it, it's not asur b'hana. So Chizkiah had said, but when you know for sure that they put wine in this brine, then it's even asur b'hana. So according to Chizkiah, that's what that last line is coming to tell you. That when you know for sure, not only is it asur b'achila, but it's even asur b'hana. And the Rabbi Yochanan, le'mu'utei moria sugvinas be'isunaiki ustamak Reb Meir. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, what it's coming to exclude are two cases of a previous Mishnah, which talked about murias, which is a fatty fish brine, where they add wine many times, and a type of cheese that's manufactured in this place called Beisunaiki, where many times they smear it with fat. And in both of those cases, Rabbi Meir had said, not only is it asur ba'achila, but it's even asur b'hana. And so that's according to this Gemara, that's what that last line of the Mishnah is coming to tell you. Only these things are permitted bahana and only asur ba'achila. There are going to be other things that are asur even bahana. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Ve'elu mutarin ba'achila. The following things, if you purchase them from a goy, are perfectly permitted. Chalav shechal ba'obi kol chavim v'Yisrael ro'ehu. So first of all, Chalav Yisrael that we today call Chalav Yisrael is not where the Jew milked the cow, but the Jew supervises the Gentile milking the cow. So that's perfectly fine. As long as a Jew is supervising, it's perfectly. That's still called Chalav Yisrael. Rav Moshe Feinstein had the famous tshuva that said that as long as the government institutes policies that they're fined, there would be a significant fine if they were to doctor it and not make it cow milk. It's also tantamount to a Yisrael watching him. That's what it seems like. V'hadavash, honey, you can buy from goyim. V'hadavdavnios, table grapes. In other words, grapes that are not meant for making into wine, but are meant for having for dessert. And that's true even if they're dripping because the grapes are leaking. Normally that would make them now primed for tumah, so you'd have to normally assume they're tameh. But this liquid does not prime the grapes for tumah, and the grapes are not only kosher, but they're also not tameh. Ukevash, and also there's no problem of yayin nesech, of it being wine from a goy, right? Ukevashin she'en darken loses lesochen yayin v'chometz. And if you know for sure that the pickled vegetables are made without any wine, because they don't put wine in this recipe, then it's perfectly okay. V'taretz she'ena trufa, fish hash, where the pieces of fish are visible, so you know it's coming from a kosher fish. And vitzir sheyesh badaga, or if you buy a fish brine, where this certain kind of non-kosher fish is seen within the brine, that's a sign that it's a kosher brine. Let me just explain. This tzir is juice or brine from a fish. And Rashi had told us on the previous Mishnah that there's two types of fish brine. One is fish brine from a non-kosher fish, and that you can't buy. The other type is a kosher fish brine. How do you know the difference? The kosher fish brine has a tiny little fish called the dag kilbis, which is a non-kosher fish, but apparently resides within this fish brine from a kosher fish. So you have to remove the non-kosher dag kilbis, but the rest of the brine is kosher because you know that it came from a kosher fish.
And it wouldn't live in a treif brine.
It does not live in a treif brine. That's right. Now, ve'olah shel chiltis, a whole chunk of ginger that's not been cut up, you can buy. V'zeisig luskos hamigulgolin, and also pressed olive mash that's made into like a cake. That's perfectly kosher. The Gemara will have to say what's possibly the problem. And Rabbi Yossi Omer hashlachin asurin, a certain kind of pressed olive that's called shlachin is going to be asur. We don't know what that means. We'll have to look in the Gemara. When it comes to buying locusts, if you're buying the locust from the retailer where he could have already processed them, then you can't buy it from an akum because he could have added wine in the processing. So that's asur. But if you buy it from the field where they harvest the locust, so they haven't processed it yet, then you can buy it there. V'chein l'truma, and the same halacha applies to truma. Now what that means, we don't know what that phrase means. The Gemara will explain. Tanina laha detanu rabbana. So we've already learned a lot of these halachas, including the law of milking a cow with the Jew supervising. The Brisa says, Yoshev Yisrael b'tzad edru shel obe kol chavim, va'obe kol chavim cholev lo umevi lo ve'eno choshesh. That as long as a Jew is sitting among the flock while the akum is milking the animals, it's perfectly fine. So the Gemara says, Heichi dami, what's the case? Idaleka davar tami be'edro pshita. If there's no non-kosher animal in the flock, then obviously the milk will be kosher. Even though the Jew is not directly supervising it, there's no other place for the guy to get the milk from, so clearly it's kosher. V'idika davar tami be'edro amai. So, and if you're going to tell me that the guy has a combination of both kosher and non-kosher animals that give milk, let's say he's got camels and he's got cows. Well, then why, if the Jew is sitting with the flock and he's not directly watching the milking, can you assume that the milk is okay? So the Gemara answers, La'olam di'ika davar tameh v'chi koi chazile v'chi yasiv lo chazile. Ma'u the tema kevin di yasiv lo chazile nechashtul ma'maisim ma'arif bei Kamash malan keven dechikoi chazile irsuse mirsas v'lomi arev bei. So the Gemara says what we're talking about is where the guy in this flock has camels and cows. And the Jew who's there is not directly watching the milking, but he's close enough that while he's seated, he cannot see the milking. But if he just stands up and looks, he'll be able to see the milking. You might have thought that since he's not directly watching, we can't permit this milk because we don't know where it comes from. The chiddush is that even though the Jew is not watching every single animal being milked, but since the goy is in fear that maybe the Jew will take a peek when he stands up, he's not going to try any funny business and try to pass off the camel milk as cow milk. Mm-hmm. So by the way, as you all know, all milk that's produced commercially in North America is cow's milk. Mm-hmm. And the only animals that are in the herds are cows. Mm-hmm. And that's the basis of Rav Moshe's tshuva. And right, okay. Next, v'hadavash. You can buy honey. Davash l'may nechoshla. Imishum aruve meisra sari. Imishum bishulei v'kolchavim nechol kamo shulchai. Imishum golayov v'kolchavim nos intam levgamu u'moter. The reason why honey you can buy from a goy is because what do you have to worry about? If you're worried that he's going to doctor it by adding a non-kosher wine to it, that spoils the honey. He's not going to do that. He's proud of his product. If you're worried that maybe because in the processing he cooks it to refine it, he says, and it's bishul akum, it's not bishul akum because you can eat it raw. Anything you can eat raw is not subject to the prohibition of bishul akum like we learned before. And finally, if you're worried that maybe he's going to cook it in a non-kosher pot and it'll absorb the flavor, but remember we said it's no sein tam lifgam, it adds a negative flavor and therefore it's not something you have to worry about. We then said that these table grapes, even though there may be leaking liquid and it may be a problem of stam yenam, it's not a problem. They're not going to become tummy through that, and it's not a problem of a goy's grape juice or wine. Or a mini, but let's raise a contradiction. The question is, we know that there's another brisa that says that there was a machlokas between Hillel and Shammai that when you bring grapes to the wine press, preparing them for being pressed, at what point do the grapes become huchshar, primed to be makabel tumah? If the grapes are leaking and some of the juice from the grapes goes on the surface of the grapes, they immediately become primed for being makabel tumah. And therefore, and not only that, but if a goy were to touch the juice, he would make the juice now stam yenam or yayin nesach. So why is it over here that we're lenient and over there we're machmir? Because Hillel even relented to Shammai's position and was machmir over there. So the Gemara answers, Hasam kaboile lamashka hachalo kaboile lamashka. The difference is one's table grapes and one is juicing grapes. Juicing grapes, you want the juice. And so therefore it has the din of yayin. But over here, you don't want the juice. You want the grapes to be not leaking. Because the juicier the grape, the better. So therefore the juice is an undesirable byproduct and therefore it doesn't have to be reckoned with at all. Next, v'taris she'ena trufa, a fish hash which is not completely chopped up. Tanu rabbanan ezu hu taris she'ena trufa, to what degree do the fish have to be visible? So kol sherosh v'shedra nicker. As long as you can make out the head of the fish in this chopped up fish combination and the spine. Because like Rashi says, not only your fins and scales are a recognizable feature, but as long as a fish has a spine, that's a sign of a kosher fish. And if it's not a non-pointy head, that's also a sign of a kosher fish. So as long as you don't even have to make out the scales, as long as you can make out the shape of the head and the spine, then you know it's a kosher fish combo. And then the Mishnah had said that if you have a fish brine, that you can find this kilbis fish floating in it, so then you know that it's a kosher brine, as long as there's at least one or two of those kilbis fish. It's a little tiny fish. So the Gemara says, I don't understand the language. Hashta kilbis echas omarta shari shtei kilbayos mibaya. Why did you say at least one or two? At least one or two means at least one. Right. So why do you have to say or two? So the Gemara says, Lo kasher kan bepesuchos kan bestumas. It says because there are two different halachas. When you purchase a barrel of brine that's sealed, and you open it up and you find one kilbis fish, so then you know for sure it's kosher brine. If you open an already open barrel of tzir, and you only find one kilbis fish, that's not good enough because it may have fallen from some other foreign
One is accidental,
barrel.
but two
It
would
could have
be-
fallen in accidentally, so therefore you need to make sure that there is at least two. We'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful Erev Shabbos.